The Iraq War had, to a large degree, the mission of capturing a looking glass technology that was dug up in Sumer, which was originally in the possession of Gaddafi in Libya, which is why they attacked Libya. Gaddafi got rid of it and gave it to Saddam Hussein.
Hey guys, so today on this YouTube video you clicked on, we're going to be talking about Project Looking Glass. Now, I will assume you know a little bit about it since you clicked on this video, but Project Looking Glass involves secret, military, very classified endeavors into time dilation, time distortion, some might dare to say time travel. We will do the best we can to put together the story of Project Looking Glass, the history, how it developed, and what happened with it, as best we can, with different testimonies from corners of the internet that I've dug up from people whose histories and backgrounds and credentials do seem to indicate that they did indeed work with military intelligence, as their testimonies suggest. Now, Looking Glass is kind of tangential to things like the Philadelphia experiment, to Tesla's research. So I have some other footage also that I dug up, which is actually of the person the government contracted to go through Tesla's research and what they found in it, as well as super secret weapons that were being hidden. And that person is actually John G. Trump, Trump's uncle. So this all ties in weird and mysterious ways. And that's without even mentioning the 1893 book written by Ingersoll Lockwood called Baron Trump's Marvelous Adventure or whatever, about Baron Trump going to find time traveling tech or whatever in a deep underground military base, while Don Trump, his father, is literally a president who lives on Fifth Avenue in New York. Yeah, a book that's written in 1893. Look it up if you haven't. There's lots of videos about that though. So anyways, let's get started with Mr. David Wilcock. May he rest in peace.
Today is the very first public unveiling in a public presentation of Project Looking Glass. A human being is about this tall. This is built in underground bases. It is colossal in size. And what happens is when you fire this thing up, these rings start going in all different directions. It shields off the barrel of water inside, which is just like your pineal gland. The water inside flips over into time-space, which then captures argon gas, captures visual images, and this is what it looks like. It becomes huge, glowing, all the way out to these posts, which are used as stabilizers for the energy field. Now, it doesn't start out with an image of the Earth. That's just there as a placeholder, although you could see the whole Earth like that if you wanted to. That's not usually what happens. Well, contact, right? We have been given the technology right in front of our faces in the movies. They just don't tell you what it's for. The different rings moving. This actually looks like the fisheye lens distortion effect that happens around the looking glass when you power it on. There's a gantry crane up at the top, and the little guy is dropped down and goes inside. That's like your barrel inside the mechanism there. And this is where all the action happens. This is where the Stargate opens, the wormhole into the higher realms. In this frame, we're seeing how the whole thing collapsed and fell apart. So, of course, you want to take a ride. You know, the new the new formation of the one after the old one breaks. And here we're seeing the new one. Once again, you get a very clear view, and there's your little eye with the rays coming off it, just like the all-seeing eye on the dollar. Not surprising. Here she is. It's even larger than the real one, standing on this ladder, looking down inside. This is the chamber and the chair inside, which we'll see is very important. And here's your geometry. Look at that. Did anybody notice that when you were watching the movie? Because it goes by pretty fast. That's that same geometry that's in the background radiation of the whole universe with the sphere in the center. They fire it up. Guess what happens? Big, bright luminosity, just like the real thing. The real thing that they're actually using and have been using since the 40s at least. And here's what it looked like from the control room. It gets brighter and brighter, and then she starts having the floor disappear. She gets dropped down inside, and then, of course, she goes through this wild wormhole ride, and there's an ascension experience at the end of the dream. The Iraq War had, to a large degree, the mission of capturing a looking glass technology that was dug up in Sumer, which was originally in the possession of Gaddafi in Libya, which is why they attacked Libya. Gaddafi got rid of it and gave it to Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was using this technology, viewing the future. The U.S. government went in after him because they felt that the fate of the world was at stake, because if they did not capture this technology and get it back and deconstruct it, that the Earth would have a pole shift. But when you actually decipher these letters, it means the doctrine of the convergent timeline paradox. Here's the problem. You look through time with this device, And when you hit 2012, everything goes perfectly white. As you get closer and closer to 2012, starting in around 1980, a very strange thing has been happening when they use the looking glass. There is an interlacing of images. So right now, imagine that if I had this slide on half the time, and in the other half of the time, there was an image of like a face. And if I interlace them slowly, then maybe every second it goes from here to the face to here to the face. Then as it speeds up, it gets faster and faster to the point that if it were complex images, you couldn't make out one from the other because they're flip-flopping so fast. Okay? That's called interlacing, and the frequency of the interlacing gets higher and higher as you go towards 2012. So anytime that they try to look at, like, or they used to try to look because they're not using them anymore, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, bam. It's so interlaced that they have a whole server farm of computers just to deconstruct the two images and be able to see what they're looking at in the future. So again, this is what they're using. This is one of the main ones they're using, the Orion Cube as they call it, or the Cube. And also it's being used with Looking Glass. But what's going on with 2012? Well, here's another very interesting thing. We have multiple parallel futures that we can choose. And 2012 literally does represent create your own reality time. It has everything to do with what do you expect is going to happen. This is where thoughts becoming reality really takes on a whole new meaning in a way that you've never heard of before. So what they found that was so bizarre was that at December 21st, 2012, they could calculate it down to the day, that's how precise this was, that for some reason all the graphs, all the waves would go into a complete flat line. They no longer moved up and down like before. They went flat for like 7 or 8 seconds. So then they're asking the guys that went through these stargates and were traveling into the future, what happened to you? Every single time that somebody tried to hit 2012, they said the same thing. There was this thing they called the bump. It actually hits you like a bump. You actually feel like you've slammed into something. And as soon as it slams into you, you have the most incredible religious experience you can imagine. Cosmic consciousness. Your consciousness just blasts into this wonderful place where you have awareness of no space, no time. All knowledge is available to you. Ecstatic God consciousness. You could be the galaxy. You could be a subatomic particle. You can go everywhere, do everything, and there's no sense of it ever ending. So when it finally stops, you just can't even believe that you're back to who you were before.
Like what happened to Jodie Foster?
Exactly what happens to Jodie Foster in Contact. So,
Is that the moment of no time?
that's the zero time, yeah. And Daniel doesn't agree with me on this, but I believe that 2012 is our zero.
Could you briefly describe Project Looking Glass and Project Sidekick for us?
Project Sidekick was another project going on with Galileo. Galileo was the project that I was involved in. Sidekick dealt with any of the weapon potential of the craft, whether or not the craft had a weapon in it, or could it be used as a weapon, but it had something to do with some sort of particle beam configuration where the gravity generator can be used as a lens to focus a weapon of some sort, similar to the SDI device we were working on in the 80s, but with the potential of a focusing device using the gravity generator.
And Project Looking Glass?
Project Looking Glass dealt with the distortion, the fact that there's a time distortion, essentially looking back in time, and by that I do not mean looking back years ago to see the wagon train days. They're looking for distortions that are milliseconds in time, and what that was used for, I don't know, but that was just observing the time, the time distortion, time dilation phenomena of the craft in operation.
Certify was what I had my hands on. There were, there was talk of weapon systems, that there were different projects. Project Galileo, Project Sidekick was supposed to be weapon applications of the craft. Project Looking Glass had to do with time, any effects of time in the craft. Now, I don't think, we're not talking about making a time machine like in science fiction, but we're talking about, small distortions, intentional distortions of time, and how that can be used, as a, not as a, well, it was part of a weapon program.
How are you informed in this?
These, again, were just the small briefings that I read.
Now, the rest of the whistleblowers are going to be a lot more in depth. I just include Bob Lazar because at this point, regardless of what people think about him, I think it's established that people do believe that he was indeed at S4, so theoretically he would have been receiving those briefings.
I'm a microbiologist, a retired one now, but continuing somewhat the practice involved in a very unusual project called Lotus. I am a 20-year retiree from Majestic, first having been brought in 1986 under the auspices of the Committee of the Majority, and specifically working for the Majestic 12, assigned to Project Aquarius.
Okay, so this looking glass technology comes from cylinder seals.
Originally, yes.
How?
Originally, it was a series of instructions for accessing the wormholes which naturally pass in the hyperspace in which we find ourselves. And from there, they worked on the technology. They built the equipment from the instructions. After building the equipment from the instructions, they began to tweak it and find different things out about it. One of the things that they found is that they could actually use it as a peering portal, like a peering glass, if you will, to see different aspects of not only the future but the past.
Are these
And
Sumerian?
I would say that they slightly predate Sumerian time frame, but that some of the information which came down from cylinder seals that slightly predated the Sumerian time frame were then recopied in Sumerian seals as well. And those cylinder seals, oh yes, and those cylinder seals, to the best of my knowledge, have all been obtained.
From Iraq?
Some of them from Iraq, yes.
Some of them from
Some of
Egypt?
them from Egypt, some of them from other countries where they were being stored.
And
I really don't want to get my country into too many problems here.
and you've got, go ahead.
For a second, it's
Well, we had looking glass technology and portal, actual Stargate technology in Iraq as late as the start of 2003. And a lot of countries didn't want us to enter Iraq. We did them, didn't we?
Right. But how is it that, in other words, it sounds
Omar
like...
just handed his two over. We just told him that we were going to make him rich beyond avarice. And he was a little smarter than Saddam, that's all. And so what he did is he handed them over and says, "Oh, please come into my country." He says, look at my equipment to make sure that I'm not making any weapons of mass destruction. Meanwhile, out the back door goes the two that Saddam actually had transferred over to him.
Cylinders.
Equipment. Stargate. Activating technology.
Portal.
Yeah, for them to experiment with. They were experimenting.
But if the looking glass technology is the same thing, is access as a wormhole. The technology
Essentially it does,
accesses a wormhole.
yes.
It also accesses stargates.
Well, that's essentially the same thing. I've been using the term Stargates technology as meaning a machine that accesses a wormhole by spreading out the energy, the strange matter, or whatever it is, and I'm not a physicist, that spreads it out in a compatible way to either communicate through it or passage of information. And that includes also...
But it occurs naturally. Stargates occur naturally.
Indeed, they do. The numbers that we received before the looking glass was shut down, dismantled, was that there would be a 19% probability with an 85% confidence that the disaster would occur, that there would be a transition from timeline 1 to timeline 2. But that then means that there's an 81% chance that it won't. And so the individuals who want to carry the negative, "I'm convinced that it's going to occur," are not presenting the facts. The facts are, this is the material that we have available that we know.
So what you're saying is the Illuminati, to get back to that thread,
Yes.
is basically the side that believes that the transition is going to occur from one timeline to the other.
Not only do they believe that it will occur, they want to provoke it.
My military career was such that I was in the United States Navy from June of 1991 until June of 2001. In that time, I served in a special unit called SEAL Team 9. We were trained primarily to use us as an asset to control and handle Tomahawk missiles, cruise missiles, that were used inside the Persian Gulf region in the Middle East throughout the time frame of 1992 to 2000, to my knowledge.
All right, so that's just a little background on who he is, what his military experience was. But now he's going to talk about, in this next clip, about how he was contacted by some white hat ex-military people, a secret group, classified, who needed his help with Project Looking Glass. So that's what's in this clip.
Shortly after I began doing that, I was contacted by a group of people that were also doing the exact same thing, and were much more aware of who I was and what my experience in the military was on a top secret level. I was very surprised by that. But I learned very quickly that there's people out there with a huge amount of information that are fighting for the good guys.
Okay, so in essence, you were contacted by a group of what we call white hats.
White hats, I call them oath keepers, but essentially they're the patriots that our government would classify as terrorists.
Okay. But they are ex-military by and large, and some of them are still in the military.
I would assume a large number are still in the military or the government, in the FBI, Secret Service, CIA, any alphabet agency. There's got to be a percentage of people that are seeing the day-to-day and going, this is wrong, we got to do something. One of the caveats that I do have some personal information that I did get personally involved in was some information that had to do with the Stargates and Looking Glass, and more specifically the 2012 problem with those projects. I guess popular opinion of what's out there right now is that the project was shut down because there was a problem when we approached 2012. I've heard it described a number of ways, but to my knowledge, the problem is that the timelines converge on that point in time. And when you know enough about the Stargate projects and the Looking Glass project to know that how string theory works and how the possibility of possibilities works and how making one choice over here doesn't necessarily mean that the other choice couldn't exist at the same time. But once you get your brain wrapped around this subject, you find out that at the end of 2012, in an easy way to put it, the choices that we make become less and less consequential to the future. And eventually we're pushed into this bottleneck of time, no matter which choice we make. And that's important to the people that had access to Looking Glass, because they would use Looking Glass knowing the choices that they would make and the future would pop up. The big mistake was coming up with the possibility of future. And when we started using a computer to say, well, if we make this choice, it's 79% possible that this scenario happens, and 23% are possible, or whatever, I'm using round numbers, that this scenario would happen. The understanding at the time was that was realistic. However, if you go down the road further and free will continues to exercise itself on this game, that 79% possibility sometimes changes very, very fast. But if you look at the situation in a point of time, it seems very realistic that that's the greatest possibility. What happened was people, very smart people, began to figure out that something big was coming up. Something that made it so all the possibilities of all the future scenarios of any choice, any possibility that was fed in and observed through the looking glass inherently ended up in the same future. And no decision and no possibility changed past a certain point. That's the big secret.
Okay, so is that certainly 2020?
It well coincides with December 21st, 2012.
So at that point, all possibilities lead to the same
Timelines.
Rubicon.
All possible timelines lead to the same basic set of history in the future.
And what is that history to you? Did you know that, or did you find that out?
That is the big question. That is the big secret. That is what sends everybody that has all of the information, that knows everything, into a blind panic. The people that know everything about Looking Glass, that have gotten all the reports and all the information, the elites of the world, probably figured out that that was the end of the game, and nothing could be manipulated beyond that point.
So I'm just going to let it continue here. He continues talking about the contracting timelines and what that means. So I may play through a few clips here in a row.
They cannot go beyond a certain point.
At a certain point, after they're done hearing the computer tell them this is what's going to happen over and over and over and over again, all they become focused on is how do we fix it?
Why? What is this that's going to happen?
The
You know that?
inevitable contraction of the timelines.
But what does that mean for this reality? Do you know that?
I don't know that. What I do know is that I was called in and asked to solve this problem, this timeline contraction problem. And I eventually did my due diligence and did all the investigating, and basically only had one piece of information, and that was reinforcement. The computer's right. The timelines will contract down to some inevitable thing that you guys won't tell me about, so I can't help you. There is an inevitable event. It's been forecast, it's been predicted, it's been fed to us in a slop trough of what they want us to believe will happen.
But they don't.
However,
know.
they don't actually have control over what happens. They only have control over the reaction, and it seems that no matter what they try to do to cause their desired reaction, it's going to have an opposite effect. Now, it's much, much easier for me to explain today what that process is as opposed to back then. But if I had to give it a name, I would say it's the awakening process. It's an evolution of consciousness that cannot, will not, and no matter what decisions or possibilities are injected into the equation, eventually it all resolves down to us all learning the truth and becoming aware of this massive dam of lies that has been built that keep us from knowing massive volume of information that we should otherwise possess.
Because that they would lose control.
Because that information was a monumental concern when I was in the military about how to prevent this inevitability. Now, at first I thought it was end of the world. Now I see end of the world as end of their world. Any attempts to try to go away from this one inevitable conclusion, I again see as a new beginning, an end of this reality, the beginning of something that we can't even possibly understand based on the level of our beliefs currently. But when all that information comes flooding out, there's going to be no denying what's true and what's a lie or what's illusion. We won't have the choice to believe that 9/11 happened because of a bunch of terrorists, because we'll know exactly what's happened. Basically what we're experiencing right now is two master chess players sitting at the board. And one of them looks down at the board and sees that he's in checkmate in 7 moves. And he looks across at his opponent and he knows that his opponent sees it too. So there's no getting out of it. So at this point, the loser can only prolong the game. The game, both players know the game is over. It's only a matter of time before he does this, and then you're forced to do this, and then he's forced to do this, and eventually checkmate. We, as a race, if we could understand that the game is over, that based on the rules of the game, the bad guys have already lost, the good guys have already won. Yes, there's moves left on the table, but those moves are being forced by the player that is going to win. The only way that checkmate can't happen is if the player that's winning makes a mistake. But from all of the information that I've gathered, all of the information that's been given, all of the information that's been vetted to me, it seems pretty obvious that the good guy player on the side of the chessboard knows exactly what has to be done to win the game. And so at this point, any mistake would be all but impossible.
All right, now just, to recap that, but to just make a statement and say, man, that to me sounds just like God and Satan. And this is the final chess game, according to what he's saying. And they are playing it out, but like he says, the bad guy, Satan, doesn't have any moves he can make that will change the outcome. And that's what this Project Looking Glass is all about, is the elites using it to find out about that outcome, and they're freaking out. And they shut down the project because they couldn't see anything past that timeline convergence that God is masterminding. God is bringing all things to a logical conclusion, to his will. And so truth will be revealed by his power. And these two chess players are battling it out, but there's no move that's going to change the end of the game. And the good guy, as he says, God will win.
I was entrusted in getting it down to 2 possibilities. And I've heard both of those possibilities talked about in massive proportions, the good and the bad.
Okay, so can you in one sentence say what the good was and the bad was, or are you able to do that? To most easily put it to people, I suppose.
One scenario is what most people would understand to be ascension, or an evolution of consciousness, that brings us out of the cocoon and turns us into a butterfly. Timeline 2 is some kind of major global catastrophe that drives most of us underground and leaves a few of us on top to fend for ourselves.
Can you explain why they have been hedging their bets to such a degree on the negative?
It's very simple. They're insane. And beyond insane, they have literally deluded themselves into believing that they can somehow manage to get away with what they're trying to get away with. There is a distinct lack of reality in that thinking.
That there's been some kind of adjournment, and now there's a new body, and it's not going to be comprised of the same people as the old body.
True.
So why? Why have they changed members? What's the motivation?
There's a switch over between two secret societies going on. One is handing reins over to the other, and it has been long planned. However, it's not been long known by me, but it's been long planned, probably decades. I'm certain it has to have been for decades.
So Majestic is ruled by a secret society, is what you're saying?
Well, Majestic has been the most famous, next to probably the Freemasons, secret society of itself. And there are many of the Freemasons who inhabit the Majestic as a consequence of their relationships. The two things are happening at the same time. And so their philosophies then, the philosophies of these associated secret societies like the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, are then imparted into the secret society known as the Majestic.
So what's the quarrel between...
Because you bring who you are to wherever you are.
Sure. But what's the quarrel between, say, the Majestic Society or group and the Illuminati?
That is a real good, and it's the best question to be asked. Even more importantly than the differences between the J-Rods, because this impacts us, I think, now. Many members of the upper echelon, and I don't mean the hard-working people who work on construction sites, for God's sakes, but many people who are in the upper echelon of the Masonic movement, both York and Scottish Rite, have accepted a philosophy which is Luciferian in context and history. Many of the people who are not directly then involved with the Majestic, who are also associated with that Luciferian philosophy, have rubbed up against each other for decades, probably even longer. So somewhere along the line in history, there was a schism between those individuals who have accepted a Luciferian history, Luciferian philosophy, mixed with other secret society people who have not, that ended up in the Majestic, and people who have accepted a Luciferian, almost like a different denomination, if you will, accepted a Luciferian philosophy, who are not associated with the Majestic. In other words, we've got dirty coins on both sides.
Okay. And when you say a Luciferian philosophy...
meaning a materialistic, and for lack of a better term, when it comes to the actual European Illuminati, satanic philosophy, where they've given their lives, their families, their sacred honor to this satanic thought of creating a world order under the person that they consider the true God, which would be a Luciferian figure. Now, these people have also, separating them from the dirty coins in the majestic side, these people have also been accepting of the influence of the P45 rogues who want to justify their own history by our demise of moving from timeline 1 over to timeline 2, a catastrophe. And so the differences between the majestic group, some of which there have been these Luciferians mixed in, and the true Illuminati group, and they're not even really true Illuminati. I mean, that's a word that comes back meaning enlightened ones, and these people are not enlightened. They're simply under the influence of a false light. That the differences between the two then have raised itself to rancor, even though they share much in common with each other. However, on the majestic side, you have a lot of God-fearing people too. A lot, and I'm not talking about specifically here the 12. I'm talking about the line people, the people that we've worked with. Good people to the bone, to the soul, who want nothing but good for the world.
So basically what you're talking about is there seems to be an alliance between, for lack of a better word, the so-called Illuminati group that is satanic followers, and the P45s, what you call the P45s. Mm-hmm. And the majestic group, which even though it has some members from the Illuminati, basically is siding with the P52s.
Yeah, I wouldn't really call them I would say that they are Freemasons who have accepted the Luciferian influence. In other words, I personally disagree with it. Mm-hmm. The Luciferian influence, but are still acting as good people.
For the benefit of humanity.
For the benefit of humanity, exactly. And then there are some that I've interacted with who are involved with the so-called true Illuminati in Europe that are God-fearing people too. There's dirty coins and there's polished coins on both sides.
Alright guys, now next we're going to cut to an interview with John G. Trump, Donald Trump's uncle, where he discusses some of the things that he found when the government gave him Nikola Tesla's work, his unfinished work, his personal notes, a bunch of stuff for him to look at.
To Boston to find Dr. John Trump of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Dr. Trump was now retired from the company he founded, High Voltage Engineering, but he agreed to meet me at the company office the next morning.
In the spring of 1943, Dr. Carl T. Compton, who was then president of MIT, asked me to go to New York and examine the effects of Nikola Tesla. These were contained in an upper floor of a warehouse somewhere in New York City. And I spent a good deal of time examining one by one the papers, the books, and various other memorials that he had accumulated. But I was particularly looking for something which would be evidence of a secret weapon, which I was reminded by the two agents who were present during the entire time, was a matter of concern to the United States. In the course of this, I did come across a number of letters directed at the upper echelon of the British Empire, that is, I think, to the King and Queen, or perhaps just to the King of England, and also to the Tsar of Russia, explaining that he was the inventor of a secret weapon which had rather remarkable properties, and that he would be interested in entering into a negotiation which would lead to a disclosure of what they were. Of course, I spent a good deal of time looking through these papers, trying to find out what the nature of this secret weapon was. I think I had, although I don't remember it so very accurately, an idea of what its properties were. it had the capability of acting at a great distance, of being destructive to flying objects and things of that kind at a place which was remote from the source. But nowhere in his technical papers did I find anything which revealed an explanation of just how such a device could operate.
I believe that you also opened another box, supposedly a secret weapon that he left at another hotel. Can you relate that story, please?
Yes, when I had substantially concluded my study on the following day, I think that was a Saturday morning, I was reminded by one of the two agents that there was a box being held as a security for an unpaid obligation, and that this box was an item of considerable value and may indeed itself be the secret weapon, that it was armed and therefore it probably was not touched.
Were you nervous doing this?
I found it a matter of a bit of concern. However, I realized that this had to be done, and so we taxied down to this hotel. The agents identified themselves and their credentials to the assistant manager of the hotel, who led us to a room. This room was essentially empty except for a table and a steel cabinet against the wall, which was opened. I think perhaps he opened it with a key. The cabinet itself was empty, except on one of the lower shelves was a package, a box, a rectangular box of ordinary size, which was wrapped in brown wrapping paper. It turned out to be a highly polished box with brass clasps, and it looked more like an instrument case. And after waiting a while and listening a while and remembering that it had been there for quite a few years, I think it had actually been there for about 5 years as a security, I opened it. It turned out to be a Decade resistance box, manufactured by, I suspect, an American manufacturer, and something of value, but not great value, and certainly nothing ominous at all in its nature.
So after Dr. Tesla had let the world know of his secret weapon, after he had written letters to the King of England and to the Tsar of Russia, offering them this weapon at a time when both were engaged against the Germans in World War II, no evidence or papers were found which referred to any such secret weapon.
My report to Dr. Compton was that I saw no danger in releasing these papers and these relics to his heirs.
Miss Musar had arrived too late to know who had opened Dr. Tesla's safe or what had been removed. And Dr. Trump had found nothing which he considered dangerous or a secret weapon. Tesla had been a naturalized American citizen for 54 years, so why were his papers seized by agents of the custodian of alien property? I suspect that governments other than those of the United States, England, and Russia were interested in the inventions of...
Alright, lastly guys, I'm also going to include a link to this article. It's just another person's breakdown of the looking glass tech. A lot of patents, a lot of interesting stuff in here. I mean, it's like 20 pages long. It's got some interesting breakdowns. It delves into the specific science more than I really could. It talks about convergent timelines, all these paradoxes of, if a Christian versus an atheist wanted to watch the resurrection, maybe, they would see different things because apparently manifestation is really a base determiner of the reality we're in, and the way you can use mathematical probabilities to play with time. So, yeah, that will be included also. Honestly, this is just as good as watching all these testimonies. I would say it's summed up pretty well here. So, thought I'd include that for the people that are still here.